I'd like to take the time to invite some of our amazing vendors. These are renowned leaders in their space, founders of amazing companies. Cherish from The Future Green, Daniel from Procuri representing Circular Computing, Karen from Autopax. Karen, hi. Sam from Ipsum, and lastly Simon from Parley from The Oceans. I'd like to invite you all to the stage, as well as Thomas, who will be our moderator for this panel event.
Okay, good morning everyone and welcome. Such a full room and great energy. So we're very blessed this morning to have a fantastic panel in front of us. And we'll be exploring the topic of how can we shift mindsets? How can we make sustainable sourcing commonplace? Which is, I think, something that everyone in this room is actively working towards. Before we get started, just so that we get a feel of the room, could I ask if you're working directly or in some way in the procurement function, just put up your hands very quickly. Just raise them nice and high so we can get a sense. Okay. So quite a few people, and you are the linchpin in transforming the value chains of the organizations you work in. But the rest of us, which I think was the vast majority, we have an important role to play here too, in the decisions we make as consumers, and indeed in the decisions we make in our organizations. So we're all making decisions about how our organizations can be more sustainable and ideally more regenerative, which is the purpose of today's discussion. Okay, I think my book has disappeared. Okay. Yeah, my magic questions are in here, so I need that. But thank you, and we look forward to your participation. So I'll just give another shout out to the Pigeonhole, and perhaps we can flash that again on screen at some point so that you can ask questions as we go. Okay, having said that, Cherish, perhaps we can start with you. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you define what regenerative means, and I think how the Future Green is kind of trying to embody that.
Thank you. Cherish Tota from Bangalore, India. From the Industrial Revolution around 200 years ago, we've always been having a value extract paradigm. We look at things and we want to extract as much as value as possible. Business concepts like HR, ERP, etc. was introduced over a period of time to make only the operations better, the bottom line better primarily. Well, sustainability came in as a welcome change wherein you don't do extra harm while extracting value. Let's put it this way. Life has been a party. And we've been absolutely partying right through the night. And at one given point of time, there is something which is going wrong. There's a fire open up in the balcony, people throwing up in the bathroom. A lot of people are relating to it. Their youth, I'm assuming that. So things going out of hand. Now, sustainability is a place where you responsibly say that I book a cab and I get back home. Regenerative is for the sober people like us who stay back and restore what happened as damage. So if I have to put that into perspective, we are the ones who have believed that sobriety right through the party we were, and we want to exactly take it on to the next level. Future.Green is a platform for innovative products. We do recycled paper, we do choices in single-use plastics. We do paper and plastics as a combination. We feel that that is ubiquitous, it is all over the place. And changing the color of my paper, typically I would love to share my, I would love to spend some time with you in booth. I've just changed the color of the paper. I represent a company called Ethical Paper as well, one of my innovations. Just the change in the color. Previously, what we were assuming it was white. What is white? We changed the color to gray. So once we changed the color to gray, the first question that comes into your mind. And hey, if it serves the purpose, why use those extra resources that makes it bleached and make it white? Right? We can get away from it. And then when you bombard them with the kind of data that 17 trees, 50,000 liters of water, huge amount of GHG that goes into making white paper, I don't think any responsible company or an individual would want to deliberately choose a more damaging paper. And the same goes with my entire line of products. So in the regenerative space, I would like to say that I have positioned myself and the company. When I say I, it's always a teamwork. I've positioned the company in such a way that it becomes difficult for a person to see otherwise with the kind of product line which I have. I think that answers the question. Thanks.
No, thank you so much. And we're going to jump around a little bit rather than go in order. So I think there's another mic on the other side. But Karen, perhaps coming to you, could you share, I think building on what Cherish mentioned, but the journey you've been on and particularly the challenges you've had to overcome when trying to bring something that is more regenerative into the market?
I think the very interesting aspect in sitting in a room with procurement people is that the conversations with procurement are always very interesting. The first question they always ask is, how much is this product? The second question they'll ask is, how many SKUs do you have? And the third question they ask is, what's your MOQ? The joy, actually, of working with procurement that actually looks at their situation as problem solving for the company is this huge mindset shift that actually moves the conversation forward. So I'll just give you a very simple example of a company I work with in China. It's a huge MNC. They have products. They're a huge F&B business. You will know their products. They're in all parts of the world. Having a conversation, the procurement team was a joy because they came to us and told us about the problem that they had. They're introducing a new product. The chef wants to put in a product which is called an energy bowl. Now, the challenge of putting an energy bowl in China, and this is in Shanghai, is they have to put it in a micro oven. They have to put the rice, they have to put the meats, and then because the micro oven has to be heated to a particular temperature, no eco alternative is able to get into that micro oven. But they have this micro oven. I hope that gives you an example of what we're always up against.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that cost point comes up time and time again. So I think what you mentioned about problem solving and trying to show the value that you're bringing beyond that cost conversation. Sarah, perhaps moving to you, perhaps you can build on that and also talk a little bit about what you're doing and the challenges perhaps you've faced and how you've addressed them.
So yeah, I mean, Ipsum is an ecosystem of Singapore scientists, designers, carpenters, and skilled workers. So what we do is we look at municipal waste and we look at like agrarian waste and we try and create products out of it. So yeah, I mean, not everything is a perfect and on day one. It's always kind of trying to move, but there's this constant obsession, within our ecosystem to try and either we try and segregate something which is very hard to segregate and then recycle it, or we try and make something which can be completely biodegradable, in the future. So, I mean, that's really what we try to do. I mean, there was a conversation about, not everything is there yet, but there's this constant kind of goal, to be there. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Moving perhaps, Daniel, to you next, and I think building on the theme of, how do you demonstrate value beyond purely cost considerations in your line? Maybe you can, build on that. Yeah.
So it's actually a very good question. Often when we're talking to procurement people, the two things which come up is quality of your product and what the cost of the product is. I'm sure all of my panelists will agree that's pretty much what it mostly boils down to is what we get asked. So the importance of a quality of product with so much of a push to sustainability, to regenerative, I think it's important that we start to look towards accreditations, certifications, as we move towards this, what some people are calling a greenwash paradigm. And I think that that's a very important point on making sure that whatever is being used, whatever is going into the ecosystem is accredited, is certified to say that it is actually part of that regenerative system. So it's not just still pulling materials out of the ground and maybe at the back end we'll do something with it. It's ensuring that, people can get CO2 carbon emission reporting based on what they've purchased, what they're using, how they're using it, what the full life cycle of that product is. So an example that I can give you from circular computing or Procuri is from an IT perspective, how much CO2 emissions actually get used when creating a new laptop, when creating a new server, when creating a new iPhone, a new Samsung phone. All of that is actually quantifiable, and all of that is effectively captured by the OEMs because the EU and certain regulatory authorities are actually forcing these OEMs now to actually capture all the carbon emissions, the water usage, the electricity usage throughout the life cycle of those products. And to a very scary point, 90% of emissions, 80 to 90% of emissions actually come out of a product during manufacturing. So if you look at a laptop, it's on average about 87% of CO2 emissions actually is used during the creating of that laptop. 190,000 litres of water just for one laptop, which is the equivalent of a family of 4 in Singapore using water for an entire year. So if you multiply that across an organisation like DBS, for example, you've got 36,000+ employees. So all of a sudden, that's a lot of water usage just to create a laptop for each of you to do your job. So from our perspective, it's about keeping IT equipment in the circular economy for as long as possible and keeping it as useful for as long as possible. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you. And those facts are staggering. And I think DBS certainly, and probably everywhere, we're so obsessed with data now. So your point around, I think, greenwashing, the skepticism around some of these claims, it's a fire hose of information for consumers and the people trying to make these decisions. So building on that, and we'll jump to Simon now. I think, similar question is, at Parley, how are you going about, credibly demonstrating the impact that you're having to the people you're talking to, and I guess, pushing the mission you have forward? Yeah.
Thanks so much for this question. So Parley for the Oceans is a global network that brings together people from all kinds of areas, from artists to scientists, NGOs, governments, and also companies to tackle the biggest threats to our environment, to Mother Nature. And in our eyes, that's the plastic crisis. Oh, is that better? Okay, good. From our point of view, that's the plastic crisis, that's climate change, and biodiversity loss. And in order to tackle that, we created a strategy. And that's part of why we believe that we are credible. And it's called the Parley AIR strategy. And AIR stands for avoid, intercept, and redesign harmful materials. What we are doing is we are collecting plastic waste all over the globe. We're active in over 34 countries at the moment. We are collecting the waste, we are sorting it, and then we are recycling it to something that is called Parley Ocean Plastic. And Parley Ocean Plastic is basically a symbol of change to drive this material revolution. And it goes beyond just recycling. And that's why it's also regenerative. Because what we are doing is we want to make sure that we have a positive impact in the areas where we're working. So it's not just we're coming and we're picking up some waste from somewhere and creating some items out of it that basically nobody will need. We are looking at what kind of an impact can we have in this area where we are sourcing? Can we work with the people on the ground there in the areas that are most affected by climate change, by overfishing? You want to hire these people. You want to work with them as employees. And then you want to look at what kind of a product will be made out of it. So, for example, we are not making single-use plastic items out of the material that we are sourcing all across the globe. We are solely allowing our products, the products that we are producing with our partners, for example, Adidas, or we're also working in high fashion with Dior. We're working with our partner Thales to create many, many payment cards that are used by many banks all over the globe because they are necessary. Because we believe that plastic itself is a design failure. It's a harmful material, and at some point it needs to go away. But we are also not delusional. We understand that plastic surrounds us. And if I'm allowed to ask the crowd here, how many of you are wearing or carrying something that is made out of plastic? Could you raise your hand, please? So you see the scale of the issue. We believe that plastic needs to go away, but we are also not delusional. We understand that it's part of our daily life. And that's why recycling is so important. But what is even more important is to create awareness about this issue. What's even more important is to have, like, beside this short-term goal of recycling as much as we can and turn them into these symbols of change, products, and that's back to your story, how you can be credible, products that have a story behind the product, giving it the actual value. And then our long-term goal is to find solutions that are alternatives to plastic. And we're putting a lot of R&D into that. We're investing into companies that are coming up with alternatives to plastic waste.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I like what you shared about plastics being a design failure. And we could go into, I think, looking at how a lot of the systems we have that we're locked into need to be redefined and rethought. And that will take time. And so we need to do something today. So on that point as well, maybe we'll go back down the line, but since you have the mic, we can get your views first. What can procurement teams do practically today, or what shifts do you think need to happen? We talk a lot about mindset, but everyone has KPIs and requirements they need to hit. So what change needs to happen for people to source more regeneratively?
Also a great question. Thanks so much. I think, first of all, we need to move fast. Climate change is coming. We all know that. We are all aware of that. And the cornerstones to mitigate the results of climate change for us is to recycle, is circular economy, is creating awareness. And when it comes to the ways of how to do that, I believe the biggest shift of mindset is that we have to understand that we need to move from this take, make, and waste strategy to an actual circular economy.
Yeah. No, thank you. Karen, maybe we'll pass on to you. Building on that, what would you like to see shift and change?
Well, I actually think giving up plastics is like giving up smoking. The person who wants to give it up must want to do it on your own. I mean, I'm not a smoker, but I've had family members and I've seen the mindset shift. So now if I put it in the perspective of plastics, the functionalities of plastics are great. You can't deny it. It's had a 100-year head start on every other material that we have in our ecosystem today. But from the person using it, it is really that you want to actually make that change. And then one of the biggest shifts actually is this negativity. And every time you talk to a person, and for us, just to let you know, what Ultipax does is we use recycled agricultural waste and we create a new material to replace plastics. The biggest mindset shift is this assumption that an eco-material is a poorer cousin of plastics. And so it takes a lot of our effort to go out and demonstrate that it is not a poor cousin. In fact, the functionalities of what you as a customer want to get from plastics, you can get it in this eco-material. So again, like smoking, if you wanted to get that high, go running. So there is an alternative. And rather than preach, and it's you having to make that want and realizing that it is little small steps that can actually lead to a regeneration. And it's really not that difficult. And so we try not to have to make it so difficult for a customer. When they see the functionalities of the product and they realize like, oh, wow, I'm actually not going to be consuming microplastics. You actually can go into a freezer, you can go into a microwave, you can actually go into a stove, you can actually do what I thought, my plastics could do, but yours is even better. Now let's talk about monies, and then we look at operations. What are your savings? What can you do? Is it going back into the ecosystem? Can it be washed? So those are conversations that need to be had, but you have to make that decision.
Yeah, no, very good point. And I'm actually going to jump quickly to Cherish and then come back to you both, because we had a quick chat before, and I was looking at the quality of your paper, and to me, that paper was actually more attractive. It had more character to it, a little bit like a nice worn leather sofa or something. It just made me, it was nicer than the brand new shiny plastic thing so definitely selling your paper massively. But you have a similar challenge where you're bringing a product that could even be performing better, but the status quo is I want clean white paper. So what would you like to see shift? And maybe you can build on the point around that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I believe in optical triggers. When you see something, it needs to get a skeptic inside you to get activated immediately. You need to ask a question as to, if I can manage with this, why did I have to use that? Especially since you have so much of doomsday predictions around sustainability products, non-sustainable products. So for me, it is in terms of investing in human capital. It's one of the pillars of regenerative sourcing is to invest in human capital. So hence, please invest in our vendors, DBS. So when we get together, we'll be able to create much, much better products which are sort of compatible to your ticks in the checkbox, which you otherwise will have. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel of reaching out to a particular place. We can just manage the same infrastructure. And if we are able to think and innovate and be agile, I guess that is the answer for everything. Create optical triggers, make sure that the optical triggers are not just a clickbait, but has content in them. Any point of time, you should not ask a question saying that, hey, you didn't take care of this. Because believe me, I am one person like that. I go very anal when it comes to any kind of sustainable products. Does it do this? Does it do that? Does it do this? For example, greenwashing, as he was mentioning, is something which is so prevalent, we really don't see through. We really don't see through it. A wheat straw mug, a wheat straw sipper, for example. Predominantly, we use it without knowing that the binders which make the wheat straw as a part of the sipper is still not biodegradable. So when it reaches the end of life, it is not something which you can have a chip on the shoulder saying that you've been using a sustainable product all the while. But yes, technology, innovation improves on an everyday basis when you invest on people and you find binders that are eco-friendly. Same with me. 3-4 years it took for me to get to the paper, which you love, thank you, by the way. And the version 1 to version 4.0 as what we are in right now is a sea change. It's a sea change, and it's only happened because of the human potential of keeping it active, keeping the dream active, keeping the dream alive, that we can get to a place where it is easily acceptable, and in this particular case, much better than the alternative.
No, thank you. And yeah, I'm very much a paper person. Yeah.
Your check's in the mail.
Yeah, Daniel, maybe, moving to you, and I think, with computers and generally IT equipment, it's so prevalent. And it's only going to get worse. We change our phones every few years. We change our laptops every few years. Yeah, how are you, demonstrating the quality of I guess the solution you're bringing, and what would you like to see as again change to kind of maybe scale that?
Yeah, so I think IT is a little bit different to my esteemed colleagues up here in terms of the regenerative aspect of it. So if we break it down back into regenerative again, it's the social, economical, and ecological impact of how we use items. Now, from an IT perspective, the social impact, well, everyone's got a mobile phone these days, everyone's available 24/7. It's, everyone always needs technology these days, as bad as that sounds. Businesses require you to be online, answering questions, responding to emails. Even when you're sick these days, the expectation is still respond to some emails, particularly from your boss. Then there's the economical portion. And fortunately, when we entertain conversations around the economic changes of utilizing IT for longer, of buying regenerative IT, our cost is actually less than if you were to buy new. So in that regard, we're like, that's what I'm saying. We're quite fortunate that it's often a cost saver rather than a cost creator. And obviously, as technology improves and improves, that's just that number will go down and down and down. So on average, utilizing a pre-owned laptop, for example, saves about 60 to 70% compared to buying a new one. I should say remanufactured, not pre-owned. And then obviously the ecological impact of it as well. So, being able to spout off facts and figures about how much a new laptop uses, how much a new server uses, versus being able to use a remanufactured device or a pre-owned device. There are so many reports available these days that there's just so many facts and figures available in front of us so having that conversation with procurement is actually a lot easier for us, because we can say, look, you've given us 1,000 laptops as an example. We've managed to find a good home for them because they're still fit for purpose for someone else. Maybe they're no longer fit for purpose for DBS. And this is the greenhouse gases you've managed to avoid from new laptops being dug up. So 316 kilos of CO2 carbon emissions per laptop, 1,200 kilograms of earth being dug out of the ground per laptop, as an example. And obviously, if we're talking about servers and enterprise hardware, then that number just scales infinitely more so. So, yeah, I guess going back to that, it's just around the social, economic, and ecological impact.
Yeah, no. Sort of moving to you, but before we ask that question, a reminder of Pigeonhole. I think we'll open up to audience questions next. But maybe, your final thoughts on, I think, what's been discussed and what needs to change within the way organizations source.
So I think probably the onus is on us as suppliers to actually communicate through better storytelling. When we talk about the optics or we talk about the embodied carbon, I think it needs to come out very clearly that this is the value which is going to come if you're going to choose our option. And the other thing I'm going to stick my neck out a bit and say, if you really want to make a seismic change, we need to get rid of green premium. So everybody keeps talking about it. I mean, we are quite sort of obsessed with trying to say that, what is it going to take to replace conventional materials, probably at the same cost, if not cheaper, as we go along. So I think that's where my headspace would be with that.
Yeah. No, great point to not end on, but move into audience questions on. So I have some questions here, and I think we'll, perhaps if there's anyone who has a question in the room and you can't get on Pigeonhole, just put your hand up. We'll pass a mic through. And if anyone's behind me that I can't see, someone in front of me, signal. So yeah, if you have any questions, please put up your hand. Just this first question, though, to get us started while people in the room have a think. And I think we've started to answer this, but this question does have the most votes, is, how do you go about convincing your clients? Maybe anyone want to just give an example of a conversation you've had with a client where they were skeptical at first, and then they've been convinced through the conversation that actually your alternative makes sense.
Thanks. As startup founders, that is one asset we should have. To use the power of narrative to get through the wheel of ignorance that has been ossified over the period of time amongst everybody around us. Shell was an example whom I would love to share, and I do that very often. Version 2.0, the paper was not as good as what you would see now. We went ahead, we printed like 700 reams of paper for an audit clearance for Shell. The moment the auditors had a look at it, since it was not normal, since it was something which is, color was different, and for them it is very clear, it has to be just the same as what it was previously, and it didn't go through. They just sent the whole consignment back, said that this is, wow, thanks. They sent the whole, so they send the whole consignment back saying that this is not according to norms, so please redo it in the way it's supposed to and carry on. We took that as an opportunity. We went back. We just printed in the bottom saying that we are friends with the planet and we only use recycled paper. Who has the guts to say that it is not accepted? Please take it back after that, right? It's just the way of positioning, it's the way riding on to the popularity of what is around, whether we are in the SAD or the FAD of life. Are we the sad ones, or are we the ones who are using the fad amongst us? So it all depends on how you sell it, and you're pretty much there.
No, thank you. And that reminds me of saying that I think we need to win over the hearts, minds, and wallets, and let's not forget about the hearts. I think when you put it like that, who's going to say no? The next question, and I'll also invite Raj, Prescott, and Kai Ling, if you would like to jump in on any of these questions, please do. Is around recycling, particularly in Singapore. We incinerate almost everything. I think there's questions around how effective, efficient the recycling is here. And the question is recycling here irrelevant, and how do we battle this? Would anyone like to tackle that?
I'll probably take that.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to work with some waste management companies for the last 2 years in Singapore. So our biggest challenge really has been, we've got this amazing technology where we actually mine the green bin waste and we kind of segregate it automatically and we create building material from it. But our problem really has been the cost of land and the cost of power. So, to scale stuff in a large format is very, very difficult. But I'd like to share with you a small case study. We've just done some work with Tan Tock Seng Hospital, and their problem was their cataract surgery was producing the maximum amount of waste. So we actually went in and we took all their waste and we segregated it and we made intravenous trays for them, as an example. So, I think even if there are prototyping opportunities in Singapore, I think that's a good way to start. And then, you probably won't have to do it across the road, in JB.
That's a great example. Prescott, yeah? Yeah.
I'll do this one a bit because this one is very close to my heart because we manage each side of this. If you look at the circular economy, there's all the parts of that circle, right? So I hear this all the time. Okay, this other part of the circle doesn't do their job, so there's no reason for us to do our part of the job on this side of the circle. There's no reason for us to make a compostable thing because it gets burned anyway. There's no reason for us to get away from plastics, it's burned anyway. The fact is it's very hard, and I get that mindset. It's very hard to get through to the other side of it. But the fact is we have to do each part of it. Yeah, we have to work really hard on segregating and reclaiming. We have to work really hard at manufacturing something else. We have to, so pointing in a standoff saying government's not doing their job, manufacturers not doing their job, buyers are not doing their job. That's why we brought everybody here, so we're all talking to each other. So I say, yeah, we understand all those problems, and yeah, the whole incineration of everything solves a small problem and creates a big problem. So, but we all are, you have to do your part anyway. You have to solve your side of the circle so we can also solve the other side of the circle. That's how I would put it.
Oh, thank you. A couple of these are of a similar vein, so I won't always pick the one with the biggest votes. But the one that caught my eye is around how could buyers work together to support sustainable manufacturing. So with this one, any examples of how different organizations have maybe partnered and created bigger buying power, a better system to support your scale, and has anyone got any good examples of that? Any partnerships for that matter. Yes.
Thank you. One of my clients insist that there is community benefit in the raw material sourcing what we get into. For example, this was something which was introduced by a client to us. Most of the raw material what we use, which is waste paper, is resurfaced from office dustbins, industrial waste of paper, etc., etc. Now, all of this comes from contractors because we have to have a steady flow of material so that the demand is met at all times. One of our clients insisted that we have a tie-up with the Waste Paper Pickers Association. And India, of course, we have a huge amount of rack pickers. We have tied up with them, and we source material from them as well. What this does is that the contractor usually has around 10 to 15%, sometimes more than 30% of margin. Now that margin goes back to the community and not that one person who is sort of kept himself as a convenience factor. It's like a mini bar in the refrigerator in a room, right? It's so accessible. So you tend to go there always. But when you take that extra effort of going to a community and telling them that, yes, I will source from you as well, and hence getting the middlemen off, you get that 25, 30% extra. And that goes a real long way in terms of, keeping the ecosystem alive and active, I would say.
Oh, thank you. Any questions in the room? Just looking around, or are they all going through Pigeonhole?
We are not exciting enough.
Yeah. Okay, one question directed at Simon, but I'm gonna after you answer it, maybe open it up to the floor as well, because it's a bit about the tragedy of the commons and how we look after common resources. So the question is, Simon, how do you get funding for cleaning up the oceans, given that the ocean has no boundary?
How we get funding?
Yes, how do you get funding? Yeah, and
So-
maybe support as well. I would.
Okay, so partly for the oceans, when we started becoming an environmental organization, first of all, we wanted to work with companies, which was, at the beginning, it was kind of challenging because we went to them and we told big brands, big companies that we want to recycle something as nasty as marine debris into valuable high-end products. And to be honest with you, some of these brands, some of these companies, they literally laughed at us. They said, that's impossible, that it doesn't have any value. So thankfully, we proved a lot of these companies wrong. we forged partnerships, and that's back to your questions how we are financing ourselves. We forged partnerships where we are producing these symbols of change, creating awareness with the story behind the product. And that is worth a premium. But what we are also doing is, but after we were already established, working with companies, we went to governments, we went hunting for grants, created environmental projects, for example, in Mexico, where we have a ghost net interception project. What we're doing there is we're going in all these coastal communities and we are convincing the fishers to give us their old and discarded nets and not, let's say, lose them on high waters, because these ghost nets becoming a huge threat for marine life. And as an adder to that, we are also producing our own products, items, such as credit cards with our partners. So it's partnerships, it's grants, and it's our own products.
Yeah, please.
I'm going to address the three things about recycling, partnerships, and people laughing at you. For recycling, what Prescott talked about is spot on, because for us as a startup, when we got into it, the government, I mean, like for NEA, for example, would say to us, do not create a single-use item. There's no point, because when you create a single-use item, it will be incinerated. And so you're just going to add to the carbon emissions. And that was a very, very important point for us, because we thought to ourselves, that's true. You really don't want to create something that will add more problems, and then people start finger pointing. So what we had to do in our research and development was to ensure that the material that we took was, in the first place, a recycled material. It was agricultural waste that had already gone through the ecosystem once. And when we created our end product, what would happen is that even if, because in Singapore, we're really fortunate in the sense that everything we have is incinerated, but we make up only that 33% of the world's population is able to incinerate its waste. Everyone else, according to the World Bank, you're dumping it onto an open landfill. So I could have gone back to NEA to say to them, but look, Singapore's not my only market. I have other markets that will be dumping the product. But what we then did is we pushed our tech further, and we made sure, so it took us 9 months and we had to get certification to put our money where our mouth is, that actually said that even if you burn an Ultrapax container, the material, it will emit 80% less carbon emissions than plastic. So what's the situation then? You're just going to say, oh, it's only 80% left. You know, it can't be 100%. So, you know, it didn't make sense, right? So you have an incentive to change. The other thing about partnerships really was, we have some really good partners here when, as a young startup, to go in and you're having a new material, and that material has to be dried, it has to be recycled, you have to find the source of the material. We've had our share of people laughing at us. I had a really huge company that didn't even want to give us the time of day to provide us with the raw material. And now they're knocking on our door to say, hey, we remember you, we've got tons of this raw material, are you interested in it? And we're saying no, because we had to find another solution. And that other solution was also to be able to think out of the box when there is skepticism and there is cynicism, and that amazing partnership that you can develop. For us, for one aspect, when we started Ultrapax, it was when the world shut down on us. COVID had come on. I had to create materials, but borders were closed. I actually approached semiconductor companies to help me. And those were the kinds of partnerships that I forged. Because people would say, why did you go to a semiconductor plant? Because it's an essential service. And I had to think of ways and means to create my product and jump over all those hoops. And that comes with great partnerships. And it came from family companies, for example, that actually said, can make money or not in 5 years from now? And you say, can. I didn't know it can or not. I didn't even know if I was going to survive 5 months, but I said, can. And in the family mindset, okay, I'll put some bet on you. Come, Let me help you dry it. Let me help you do this. Never done this before. You try this old machine.
No, that's a fantastic point, and I think we're ending up on time. But just very quickly, was there anything else from either of you to build on that?
Not necessarily on the funding, but just in terms of what Singapore is doing with landfills and things like that. So I don't have the exact statistics for Singapore, but I know in the EU, 166,000 laptops are thrown away every year. That's thrown away, not recycled. That's thrown away into e-waste. So 50 million tons of e-waste is created every year of IT products. So the mindset really does have to start changing, as you guys have mentioned. And certainly for DBS, it starts with you guys. So thank you for allowing all of us this opportunity to hopefully change your mindset.
Thank you. And I think that's a fantastic point, because there's one question that we probably won't have the time to answer that had a lot of votes, which was around, how do you overcome the mindset change, convince stakeholders that regenerative is the way to go, especially when it comes to budget and scale. I think we've talked a lot about that, and hopefully that conversation can continue throughout the day today. But we are out of time. So thank you to our fantastic panelists for your sharing your experience and thoughts. And I think my couple of key takeaways were certainly that plastics is a design failure. Procurement is about solving problems, and if we can focus on the problems we're solving and not just the cost and how we're solving them effectively. Investing in people, and I think that's where we come back to this change in mindset, and better storytelling. So with that, I'd like to end the panel and pass back to Sean.
So again, thank you to our wonderful panel for sharing your insights and thoughts on this amazing topic.